So a warm welcome everyone for joining us here today. I'm Helen Avery, Director of Nature Programmes and GFI Hive at the Green Finance Institute. And hopefully you're all here for the NEIRF Round 2 introductory session for the farming community. I just wanted to share a little bit about GFI as people are coming in case we're new to you. We were set up 2 years ago, seeded by UK government to help mobilise private sector capital towards UK net zero and nature positive goals. And we do that by working with the finance sector and other stakeholders, including government, business, land managers, third sector, to unlock barriers and co-design solutions. With regards to nature, we support the EA and DEFRA and Natural England on the NEIRF and act as third-party assessor in addition to supporting the community practice, which we'll hear about a bit later. I also wanted to highlight that we launched GFI Hive this week, which is an open resource for nature finance aimed at the finance sector. But there are case studies and podcast interviews and papers on that website that you may find interesting if you're interested in financing nature. So we'll also be working with stakeholders that I mentioned earlier to develop financial solutions for nature. So look forward to working with you in the future. But today we're here to hear more about the NEIRF Round 2, its aims, how to apply, whether it's right for you, and also here's some examples of projects. So I'm going to pass over to Andy Slaney from the Environment Agency in a moment, who's going to walk us through a presentation on the NEIRF. Then I'll share a little about the shared learning within the NEIRF and the community of practice, and also the steps to private investment to sort of give you a sense of whether you're ready for the NEIRF, what kind of things you can expect on the way. Then we're going to hear from Glenn Anderson at Dillington Hall Estates and Paul Cottington from the NFU are going to share their experience of projects sort of seeking to attract private investment. And then finally, we'll open it up to a Q&A. There is a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, or it might be even on the side. Please do encourage you to type your questions in as we go. We may not have time for all of them at the end, but we're going to collect them and then prepare an FAQ, but we'll try and get through as many as we can, and we may even invite you to unmute yourself at some point so that you can put your question forward if it's quite detailed. A reminder, this session is being recorded and we will share the details of the recordings at the end of the session, so you'll be able to share it and rewatch it later. So with that, I'd really just love to get going and invite Andy to take the mic.
Thank you, Helen. If you bear with me 2 seconds, I'll just try and share my presentation. Can you see that? Can you see the presentation there okay? I will work on the assumption that you can, except I've just lost it. Apologies, this is not going well.
Yes, we can, Andy. It looks great.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Andy Slaney. I work for the Environment Agency, and broadly my work is related to how we develop innovative funding and green finance. So I'm pleased today to provide an overview of the NEIRF. We recently opened a second round of this on behalf of the DEFRA group. So yeah, there we go. So both the government's 25-year environment plan and green finance strategy have set high expectations of the role that green finance and private sector investment can play in financing our environmental goals and both the actions and transition needed to address the climate and nature emergencies. These expectations were recently re-emphasised by some of the commitments at the COP26 summit last month, particularly around aligning private finance to net zero, carbon disclosure requirements, and those sort of things. Traditionally, the environment sector has looked very much towards government for funding. However, in more recent years, we've seen much increased appetite from the investment sector to look at ways of financing the actions we need to finance the actions we need so that we can bring new sources of funding to supplement those the government can provide. So to support this, the government announced back in its budget in March 2020 that it would commit up to £10 million to stimulate private sector investment and market-based mechanisms. And the NEIRF is delivering on that promise. So what we're looking to fund is we're looking very much to find new ways to generate revenue from environmental improvements. So it's about stimulating a green finance approach. And just to emphasize, green finance in essence isn't significantly different from other types of finance. We're seeking capital investment based on our ability to pay back an investor. So critical to making that work, and particularly what the NEIRF is focused on is how do we generate those robust revenue streams? How do we develop strategies to deliver that at scale? And in doing so, how do we generate that confidence from investors that we can pay them back? So the primary aim of the fund is to improve the financial resilience of the environment sector and increase the overall level of funding available by stimulating private sector investment. Fundamental to this to achieving this is identifying how we can monetize the benefits of natural environment projects. So how to create revenue streams, and in doing so, how do we create investable propositions? Sorry, pardon me. The approach that we're looking to do this is through funding the development, testing and demonstration of natural environment business models, which will generate sustainable financial returns, and in doing so, at the same time, contribute to the goals of the 25-year environment plan. So we're aiming to drive innovation in the sector, bring a diversity of thought to help address challenges, and particularly stimulate a pipeline of nature positive projects where private finance can also have a positive role. So through this fund, we're looking to test revenue streams. So what's realistic, what steps can be needed to expand those revenue streams? How can we mix or blend different types of funding together, for example, public and private, but also exploring the potential of potentially new governance arrangements, such as community interest companies and trusts, focused on environmental betterment, and also looking at understanding some of our wider challenges around standards, definitions, how we verify delivery with landowners, stakeholders, and investors. So where do we see the revenue coming from? When we think about what you're trying to do through farming, clearly you're looking in some way to be growing some sort of food. However, those activities can be undertaken in different ways, and some of those ways can provide opportunities to generate value through improving some of the services that nature provides alongside the food product production. So the sort of things I'm talking about are things like improving flood risk management, maybe more nutrient management or regulation, encouraging more carbon sequestration, or potentially generating greater habitat. So the green finance challenges we have around these relate to how we can take the recognition of the value of those services one step further through monetizing those and payments. So that how do those services create opportunities for investment? So can we create markets for services such as flood risk management, carbon credits from woodland creation or peatland restoration, or potentially credits from biodiversity units, potentially from like a habitat bank or some sort of mechanism around that way to pay for habitat creation. So in essence, we need investment to drive the delivery of these benefits, and to repay that investment, we need to generate revenue from some buyer that values those benefits. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with green finance. So in the first round, this is the second and final round of the NEIRF. We opened that earlier this year, and we were heavily oversubscribed. We've got 150 plus applications, looking for in excess of £13 million worth of grants. We were only able to provide 29 projects with funding, which are all indicated on that map. All of those projects were primarily selected to be ones which provided us with the confidence they were going to succeed in producing some form of replicable or scalable model that would generate learning and share that within the wider sector. So the projects are currently in their early stages. However, we'll be sharing what we can from those projects as they develop, and you'll hear from a couple of those later today or this morning. So I've aggregated on the right-hand side projects together from that first round based on their primary source of revenue. There's considerable overlap between these, and these are really not intended to be definitive, but they're more just to help greater sense of what we've got. So broadly speaking, the projects that were funded in round one reflect the relative maturity of the market that exists. There's quite a significant focus on carbon markets, so mainly looking at woodland creation. However, there's also some around peatland, but there's also an emerging market around biodiversity net gain, with some projects looking to take these models further. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of these groups. So the investment vehicles or habitat banks, these are essentially new approaches to the governance of investment. This is where projects are looking at using finance to create an environmental enhancement before it's lost elsewhere. So using financial approaches to bridge that time gap. These projects are mainly looking to build on the emergence of biodiversity net gain. The of current projects, probably one of the largest categories relates to the monetization of multiple services. So that raises a lot of questions, but how do we attract investment in activities which address multiple problems for multiple organisations where they have multiple benefits? So on this slide, we've got a lot of catchment services and landscape projects. They both have similarities, looking at what we call layering or stacking these payments together. So raises questions around how the rules of different payments and additionality of activity impact on how you're paid. The projects, essentially the catchment projects, are mainly looking at water quality or quantity benefits, so related to flood risk or water resources, while the landscape projects are mainly grounded in forestry or farming activities. The final set, just wanted to highlight, particularly interesting to ourselves, around environmental impact bonds. They're looking very much at how we share risk. So how do we build a financial case based on a return linked to performance? And so spread the risk of new approaches between those delivering projects and investors. But above all, just want to highlight the round one projects were selected to be ones that could be replicable and scalable across the sector. I also just wanted to emphasize, it's really important that these projects are able to share learning. While we see funding to support project development as critical and crucial to take these approaches further, that's only one part of the support needed. We're trying to support projects through a community of practice, which is open to all those successful applicants, ourselves and the wider DAFRA group. Helen will talk a little bit more on that later. But through this community of practice, we're very much looking at connecting projects together, connecting them with each other, technical policy know-how, like-minded individuals, looking very much at hosting knowledge sharing sessions, so trying to share what we can. But a paramount, as things emerge, will be looking to share the knowledge that we gain from the projects more widely across the sector. So what's the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund? I hope you've had a chance to look at the guidance, but if not, it's available on the .gov website. If you search on NEIRF or use the links at the bottom of this presentation. The NEIRF is in essence, essentially, it's a grants program provided on a competitive basis. The funding is intended to support projects to develop from traditional models, which are looking at grant funding, through to having compelling cases for investment and being ready to operate on repayable finance terms. We're interested in receiving applicants from projects that broadly do two things. Projects need to and must protect and enhance the natural environment in line with the 25-year environment plan, but also generate revenue from ecosystem services in a way which enables you to attract and repay investment. So the fund is intended to help you resource project development. So it's in the early stages of projects, looking to procure what specialist advice and expertise is needed. So it's more around technical assistance and how to develop business cases rather than a fund to make capital investments and projects on the ground. The exact needs obviously vary massively from project to project. So we're not being, well, we're trying to not be prescriptive. So we're looking very much at supporting whatever activity a project needs, but around business development, financial modelling, whatever you need to understand to help with revenue generation, and more generally also supporting communications and engagement with buyers, sellers, or whoever is needed to be communicated and engaged with. We expect projects to be replicable by others. So if it's small, it needs to clearly be scalable, but just because it's small doesn't mean that it would be ineligible. Given the nature of the remit of both DEFRA, the Environment Agency, and our partners in Delivery Natural England, the geographical scope is England only. However, if benefits do accrue across border with Wales or Scotland, there will be opportunities to fund projects proportionately to that benefit to England. We also need to demonstrate the activity that's being proposed by the project is additional to normal operations. So essentially, so we can protect public money. It's not to deliver functions that you have to achieve already. So we're looking to adopt a principle of flexibility. So we're minimising those that can't apply. Essentially, not-for-profit organisations can apply, public authorities can apply, as well as private companies, but they need to be able to demonstrate good value for public money. The only ineligible applicants would be central government departments or non-departmental public bodies such as ourselves, Natural England, etc. As I mentioned earlier, we're also looking to provide additional support. As these projects, I think realistically, we know they're breaking new ground, they're difficult, they're not straightforward to deliver, so we'll look to provide support as best we can through the community of practice I mentioned earlier. Okay, so the NEIRF is intended to supplement your own resources. It's to move you along that journey from a traditional project to one that's attracting finance. It's not about spades in the ground, it's about developing a compelling investment case. So it's about business development, business planning. Examples of activities that we consider eligible are on the slide and are also available in the guidance document available online. But essentially it's around supplementing your internal resources, bringing in support and advice as you need, and particularly around how to design and structure a project so that it will generate revenue in order to repay an investment. So in order for us to assess applications, we need them to be able to demonstrate the extent to which they'll deliver on a number of criteria. Again, this is all in the guidance document. Critically, the projects must protect and enhance the environment in line with the government's 25-year environment plan, but also generate revenue from an ecosystem services in order to pay back that investment. So we need you to demonstrate, quantified if possible, the environmental outcomes of a proposed project model, and how this will protect, how the project will achieve the environment plan goals. From a financial perspective, we need to understand how the project model will generate revenue from an ecosystem service, or how cost savings can generate a return for an investor, who the buyer and sellers of the proposal are, how and if you've engaged with them, an indication of support from the project from other key stakeholders, importantly beneficiaries who will ultimately pay for those services, and an understanding of the market. What level of revenue do you expect? What's the potential of this, and how do you expect those payments to work? We also need to have confidence you can deliver the project. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you have a clear project costed model, costed project plan that presents value for money. We need assurance that all permissions and consents and other agreements are not necessarily in place, but certainly have been fully considered. How benefits will be monitored and evaluated, and how levels of investment and revenue generated will be monitored. And of course, the potential for innovation and learning, as mentioned earlier. So the NEIRF was initially launched at the start of this year, and we launched a second round and final round of funding on the 8th of November. We've got an extended application window until the 3rd of February, with applications will be assessed early next financial year, and we're aiming to award projects around about June time next year. Depends on the number we get and how quickly we can get through them. The value for an individual grant will be between £10,000 and £100,000, but it's 100% of project costs are eligible, or eligible project costs can be funded. And we're hoping projects will have a duration of ideally less than a year, but certainly no project can go beyond March 2024. A few tips we got from round one, just as a final point, is you need to be clear about the environmental benefits you expect to be created. We need you to focus on understanding your revenue. How will you turn your benefits into revenue? What's capable of paying back an investment? You'll need to spend a lot of time understanding your market, who are your buyers and what are your revenue streams. And there's no pre-existing handbook or route map for these sort of projects. So approaches are going to evolve over the course of the project. You need to be adaptable and have a can-do attitude to make these things work. But that's what we're hoping to fund through the fund. I'll now hand you back to Helen. Hopefully, who'll provide a little bit of detail on the journey.
Thanks, Andy. Fantastic, thank you. Just gonna share my screen. Okay. Sorry, I'm seeing it in reverse order. No surprises. To offer you a sense of whether you're ready to apply to the NEIRF, what you might expect along that journey to attracting private capital, wanted to really share with you what we have identified as 8 steps to investment readiness. At GFI, we developed the monitoring and evaluation plan for the NEIRF. And as part of that process, interviewed the Triodos, ESME, EA, DEFRA pilots, of which Paul was one and kindly sort of talked us through some of their challenges. And we found that there were these common steps. Actually, these steps were inspired by Paul, so I'm thrilled that he's here today. Not every project for NEIRF example sort of aligns with these steps. If you're developing a code or a trading platform, there will be different steps. But the majority of projects, we saw that there are these 8 steps. So hopefully you can see that. So applying for the NEIRF, you'll, as Andy sort of mentioned, already have started to take at least the first 3 steps. You will firstly have identified the ecosystem service you want to sell from your land. So it could be flood management, risk reduction, improved water quality, might be woodland carbon or peatland carbon, or even a habitat bank. You may not have fully fleshed out the cost or amount, but you'll have a rough idea. You'll have identified the sellers, maybe it's you, or perhaps you need to engage with other landowners, managers, farmers in your area for something more scalable. For example, natural flood management or improved water quality may require multiple sellers coming together to deliver that outcome. You'll have identified buyers. Is there a market for what you're selling? Is there a buyer? Maybe it's a water utility or a food retailer, perhaps a local authority, perhaps it's several buyers coming together, and perhaps some are private sector and some are philanthropic, or maybe even donations. Perhaps you're stacking buyers. So the NEIRF will help you develop these steps 1 to 3 in more detail. Again, perhaps you've already looked at these, developing the business case, finding step 3 of this journey. Are the buyers and sellers agreed on what's being sold? Can it work financially? Have you figured out roughly the revenue stream? Does it make sense? Then there are these sort of 3 steps, 4, 5, and 6 that the NEIRF will help you with, and that's sort of again identifying that business case. That's number 4. Developing the legal governance and delivery plan. So as you can imagine, a lot of contracts and some funding that will need to go to legal costs, and that delivery plan, especially you have a lot of buyers and sellers. Also defining the intervention costs and maintenance. Who's going to do the upkeep? Is this something that's going to be permanent, and have those costs been factored in? And 4, 5, and 6 kind of happen at once or in different order. This isn't supposed to be sort of a linear path, but just sort of show you the things that you'll be working through as you progress. So at this stage, by the end of 6, you may have reached private investment already. You may have a buyer who says, we're going to buy your service from you, pay you up front, so you can put that intervention in place. In most cases, however, the buyer is going to be buying the outcome, so the end product once delivered. So you're going to need to find a bank loan or an investor to invest in the intervention up front. So here, sort of steps 7 and 8 help you where you'll be developing that financial model, building in the return or interest rate, identifying the financial service provider or investor to work with. These slides are going to be shared, and these steps are on the GFI Hive website on the NEIRF page if you want to take a look later. If that sounds fairly daunting, I just wanted to share with you the kind of support that you'll get along the journey through the community of practice. And if you think you're too early stage for NEIRF, you can also tap into the shared learning from the NEIRF participants. So the EA and DEFRA and also the Esme Fairbairn Foundation are really committed that the learnings from the NEIRF be shared with the cohort, within the cohort of projects, but also externally, and that the NEIRF projects receive the support they need if they get stuck on any of those steps I just mentioned. So if you are successful in receiving a grant, there is a Teams platform for all NEIRF grantees to network and contact each other, and the DEFRA and EA are in that Teams, they've set it up, to share learning and advice and work through some of the challenges. There's also a SharePoint, which is on the EA site, that has helpful resources for NEIRF participants, videos, but it's open to those interested in applying to the NEIRF, so perhaps yourself, or simply just interested in what the projects are doing. And then finally, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation has funded Ecosystems Knowledge Network, you probably know them well already, run by Bruce Howard, and ourselves at GFI to support the community of practice so that we can bring in our respective audiences to help work through any challenges that projects are having. So EKN, as you know, is a platform for project managers, land managers, NGOs, local government, and there are many learnings that come out of that group that can be shared with the NEIRF. For GFI, our audience is obviously the finance and private sector, and we can bring that experience to bear. At the same time, we'll be taking the learnings in the NEIRF and where appropriate, sharing them with the general public on our platforms. So not all projects will make it to investment readiness, as Andy said, but we do know that the learnings on this journey will be absolutely critical for speeding up the overall growth of private investment in nature for England and the UK and wider, to be honest. So with that, a bit of a whistle stop, but I'm keen to sort of get the projects in who can sort of bring this to life for you. I'm going to hand it over to Glenn Anderson and Paul Cottington, who are going to talk through their projects. Glenn, I'm going to stop sharing. Would you like to go first?
Yep, thanks, Helen. I'll give it a go. Can you all see that okay?
Yeah, we can. You're in preview mode, so we can see the side slides that are coming, but that's absolutely fine. We can see the slides, Glenn.
Okay.
There you go. Brilliant. There we go.
Okay. So, brilliant. Thank you, Helen. So my name is Glenn Anderson. I am a farmer, landowner, and one of the project leads on the Wendling Beck Exemplar project. I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute overview of the project and just talk a little bit about why we applied for the NEIRF funding in round 1 and how that has helped us and continues to help us as we move forward on this journey. So the project is a collaboration, albeit very much a landowner-led collaboration, and we have 4 farms within the project, Norfolk Wildlife Trust and Norfolk County Council, all as landowners, and then we are supported by the Nature Conservancy, who are a big international NGO, Norfolk Rivers Trust and Norfolk FWAG at a much more local level, and then Anglian Water, who kind of wear 2 hats as a support organisation, but also a potential buyer of credits. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to repurpose nearly 2,000 acres of what has historically been intensive arable land and transition that towards habitat creation, nature restoration, but also regenerative farming. So there is a continuation of that food production story, but using the land in a slightly different way. Why are we doing this? We are on quite or very light land up here in Norfolk. We've had a few years now of really quite variable weather patterns, either drought or monsoon, and that starts to create a real financial challenge within the farming businesses. We feel that that historically that risk has been underwritten by subsidies, and with those subsidies declining, for us, we desperately need to find a different way of doing things before those subsidies go, to build some financial but also environmental resilience within these businesses. And with the NFU's commitment to net zero 2045, we looked at that quite hard and felt we just could not achieve that without sort of reinventing our business model. So that was where the journey started. How do we do that? As Andy mentioned in his presentation, it's about creating and restoring ecosystem services. So the creation of environmental credits, which we can start to sell to different sectors. So we've got biodiversity net gain, ESG, carbon, nutrient trading, flood alleviation, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at a broad spectrum of those markets. Where does the NEIRF help? It really starts to enable us to bring in the right expertise in the right areas, the right people, really focus on that funding and investment model. So rather than be a kind of a pie in the sky idea, really start to drill down and understand whether this really stacks up and whether this works. And going through that process allows us to start to repurpose this land early. So we are taking that habitat bank approach that Andy mentioned, which allows us to start this journey on the ground with a view to selling environmental credits further down the line. So where was the project before the NEIRF? We'd done quite a bit of the technical work. So we had signed a collaboration agreement between all of those different partners. We've done quite a lot of baseline surveys, biodiversity, UK HAB surveys, condition assessments, etc. We've done some natural capital modelling, quite a bit of data collection, and some of the early sort of financial modelling. So we had a fairly good idea of what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go. But the NEIRF has really taken that technical work and transitioned that into more of a market model. So the NEIRF will fund some really granular market analysis around biodiversity net gain, carbon, water. We're looking at ELM as well, how all of those work together, how this kind of concept of stacking multiple ecosystem services will work, how that kind of fits into a food production system as well. The NEIRF will fund the development of the habitat management plans, which are really important for how we manage that environment over the long term. So it's kind of a 45-year window that we're looking at for various different reasons, and help create a single operating company. So as Helen pointed out in one of her 8 steps, that kind of legal structure is really important. So we're going through that process at the moment of how you create a single entity to be able to deliver this project and run this project over the long term. It will also fund the legal agreements for the ecosystem services and the development of contracts, so quite a bit of a legal focus in there. And then the development of the finance model. So we're looking to partner with an asset management company to really start to develop how this investable model will work, how these revenue streams stack up against costs over the long term, how we deal with inflationary effects and things like that over a 45-year model, which is effectively front-end loaded. The benefits for going for the NEIRF for us, I think it really starts to build credibility around the project. It enables us to build partnerships with government and particularly the different DEFRA organisations. I would say it really forces you to sit down and focus on the project and how you're going to take this to market. Just the process of writing the bid really enabled us to think about it more seriously, and crafting that bid, I would say, really helps galvanise, or it helped galvanise and accelerate our project. And I would think that it would do that for most projects. It is quite a lot of work putting the bid together, but I would say to anybody that none of that work is abortive. It's really worth going through that process, because it will enable you to understand whether your project's going to work. And even if you're not successful with the bid, it will really help accelerate that project over the long term, and enable us to develop a business plan. And that whole community of learning is really important as well. So just that sounding board of other projects and working alongside other projects and sharing some of the same issues. Just touch on overall funding. So this is the overall funding as of today for the Wendling Beck project. There's three broad pots around how the project is delivered. So the technical readiness piece is all around the survey work, really understanding that natural capital model, and we were fortunate to get some help through various different sources through there. There are pots of money available in lots of different locations. It's just about going out there and talking to different people. And you can see that the market readiness phase, that NEIRF funding really forms a big part of that as well. The green is philanthropy, the blue is public, and the purple is private. And you can see over the transition of the project, there's a distinct shift from philanthropic and public money towards private money. And over the long-term delivery, it's really about mobilising that private finance to bring that into the project. There's some reasonably big numbers in there. It's slightly misleading. There is quite a bit of money in that early delivery phase from Norfolk County Council around a museum and environment hub that's being created. So that does directly benefit the project, but we don't actually see any of that money. It's about providing kind of social impact and access to some of these areas. And whilst it has a benefit, it's not direct money. But the long-term goal is that number 4, where we start to bring in private ecosystem service revenue over the long term. I'd also just make the point that I do feel we need more kind of unsecured private finance entering this space, just to kind of seed fund and pump prime these projects. I think financial organisations, there's a lot of money stacking up towards green finance, and that probably just needs to be sort of delivered more readily with less kind of emphasis on the security around that. So I'll just very briefly touch on, from a sort of a strategy and a policy point of view. The Wendling Beck is a strategic nature recovery partnership project as well. So this is not one of the historic pilots. This is a partnership with our local Natural England colleagues, and that will help see the delivery of the first 220 acres of habitat creation by March next year. And that's a broad range of habitats, from heathland to lowland meadow, river restoration, wetland creation, etc. So that really is helping inform some of the learning and cost modelling for the overall project. We're obviously a NEIRF grantee as well, so that's really funding a lot of the upfront detailed work behind this. We're also a biodiversity net gain credit scheme pilot, so working alongside Natural England, and that helps us to sort of refine and define some of the emerging BNG policies. Obviously, the Environment Bill's gone through now, which is super helpful. And it also enables us to be part of that pipeline for central government credits, which forms quite a big part of our market as well. And then we are also an ELM Tier 3 test and trial, so working with DEFRA to help inform learning about how ELM can work alongside some of these other ecosystem services, and that work will start in January. So just really briefly, 3 pictures. This is the project area today, so you can see Dereham down in the south of the project. So we're walking distance from Dereham, which is about 26,000 people. Really trying to promote how people get more access to nature and the countryside over the long term, particularly in a kind of a post-COVID world, if we ever get there. You can see the sewage works down in the bottom of the project as well, just to the left of Dereham. So that's part of that kind of green corridor, which is actually the Wendling Beck River, which is a little chalk stream as part of the Wensum tributary. And that's a kind of a snapshot of where we will transition through. So it's a much more, it's a wilder landscape, much more natural landscape, connectivity between some of these woodland belts, a lot sort of supporting and protecting that river corridor. but also some regen agriculture. We will bring some livestock in to help try and manage these habitats over the long term. And lots of different things going on there. Just a final note from me, I feel that we just need more farmers and land managers within this space. So I would encourage anybody that's looking at this kind of model to look seriously at the NEIRF funding. It really does help you on that journey. And we really want to take a kind of a learning approach to this and become, share the learning that we're discovering as we take the journey with other landowners to help them on this path. And that's me.
Thank you, Glenn. It's so great to hear from a project that's actually on the ground, and your experience really brings it to life. And thanks for your rallying cry at the end. Yes, more farmers and land managers. Paul, I'd love to invite you. I'm going to offer you a challenge that you share your presentation, and we allow by 10:20, so we allow a full 10 minutes at the end. I can see some questions up there, but I don't want to rush you because I know you've got so much to share with us. But thanks, Paul. Over to you.
So much to share. I can talk for days. So hopefully I'm off mute. I'm going to go through my project, and luckily I saw a little bit of Glenn's at the just before we all started, and just to understand the context. So Glenn's project with the partners is across 2,000 hectares. The one that I'm working on is a catchment which is 820 kilometres, and it involves 548 farmers. I work for the NFU, and I enjoy working for farmers an awful lot. I spend my time working with them. I had a farmer meeting in this area a couple of days ago, but crikey, working with 548 farmers, trying to corral them on a thing is a challenge, but it is critical we all do it. And I think Glenn's rallying cry is right. It's just really difficult. Yeah, and my context for all of this, and I wasn't quite going to be starting this way, is 58% of all farms were making a loss even with BPS, and we're just about to go to a stage where in 2024 BPS is disappearing, or a good chunk of it. So there are an awful lot of decisions to be made, and I'm being approached by farmers going, how do I rewild this, or how do I do that, how do I get into carbon? And it is exceptionally difficult, but there is a journey that we all need to go on and learn. So I'll hopefully go through it. So I am covering a project which is it's called Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme. We've got a bunch of logos and everything else, including arguments with our main board around whether or not the logo should have a tractor. It was decided for various reasons we should avoid that. So we have ourselves a nice logo which gives us an identity, and we are for farmers by farmers. Yeah, and they're absolutely determined that what we do works for them. Yeah, and it's kind of critical, and hopefully you'll see that as I go through all of this. The picture you can see there is Poole Harbour down in Dorset. The issue with it is it's got algae. The algae comes from a number of sources, and those sources include agriculture as well as the water company and their sewage treatment works and development. So our challenge is to reduce the algae through reducing nitrates that goes into there. This is the catchment, 548 farms, as I said, and it's a mixed farming across there. And they're actually really good, you know, in general terms, in terms of nitrate losses. If you looked at it across the country, they are below what it would be to be in a normal MVZ. They are all in MVZ. Why? Because Poole Harbour is a special protection area for its birds, particularly sensitive, and all this algae is there. There is also, you can see there's Poole on the eastern side of this. Poole is looking to develop. So they've got a requirement to put in loads of houses. So when we were looking at all of this, we started off with thinking there's a massive opportunity for offsetting with developers. And whilst that still remains, that's got more problematic as the laws have developed. So what really drove all of this for us is a consent order. So sat behind all of this is a requirement to get Poole Harbour into favourable status. Agriculture is on the cusp of having additional regulation to make it do that. And we looked at it and thought, ooh, this isn't quite the way to go. And the reason we thought this is pretty much because of this little bar chart. So the red line is the target that has to be achieved by every hectare of land within the catchment to get the harbour into a favourable condition. And as you can see on that picture, there are some folk who will find that particularly difficult. So we got a number of dairies, and there's some exceptionally good dairies down there. And we've got a number of poultry units, pig units, who are well above that target level. And so trying to, if the regulation was brought in, and that was a proposal from the Environment Agency and Natural England, how on earth would those farms actually survive? But then also we've got lots of lowland heathland, which is below. And our proposal was basically to go, okay, we know we have to reduce, yeah, and the quantity is pretty eye-watering. It's 500 tonnes of N per year. We've got to get there. We've got to do it in a gradual way, but can't we just balance everything up? Can't we actually create viable businesses where they put in investment and enable them to carry on, and other farms can actually support them? So can we get a balance across our whole catchment? And that's what we're trying to do. So we've put together Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme, which brings together all the farmers under one entity. And our space at the moment is we're literally press go with our solicitors to go for incorporation yesterday. So we have a community interest company, which we got various objects and whatever else that we're trying to do. And essentially all the farmers will become a member of that, and it's a voluntary scheme, and we'll provide all the tools for helping them reduce their nitrates and work with other buyers and then look at other markets. And our approach is, gosh, I've only got 1 minute already, eh? Crikey, time goes quick. I'm going to nip through this. We will basically
You've got three, Paul. 3 minutes.
Check me out. That's amazing. Right. We have a target, which is the top left-hand corner, which is essentially every year the amount of N that is allowed to be leached from each farm or the whole catchment, and essentially the numbers boiled down to per hectare target. That target gets harder every year. Yeah, and so what we've got to do is balance out those who are above it, the debtors, with the creditors who will be able to sell and balance out there. And the way we do this is, one, each farm has got to do compliance. So meeting existing regulations is imperative. So they all must self-assess that they're compliant, and there's various benefits for being in our scheme with how things work with the regulator for doing that. They will then need to fill in nutrient accounting tools. So we look at the whole of the farming practices and measures. They would then look at what they can do to reduce. They then must implement it all. Then at the end of the year, we stop your beeper thing. Then at the end of the year, the farmers will need to post-harvest actually put in their yields and what they've actually done, and then we'll go into trading. Catalyst in all of this, we got 75% of all farms in the area or the land area to sign up to an expression of interest because they thought this was the right way. So we had a really good groundswell of support for it. Just putting in the opportunity, getting the initial funding from ESME, the Environment Agency, and DEFRA really kick-started what we're up to. But we got farmers, a core group of farmers who are committed to this, and I can't state more heavily that you need to have that. We've got the groundswell of people behind it, we've got the NFU behind it, and we've got people from all the different organisations who matter to help it. We've got a bunch of governance. We are going to be delivering nitrates, which in and of itself will also lead on to a number of things. So, and I'm kind of trying to show with diagrams stacking. We deal with that horrible algae, stack on top of it. How does the SFI work? And there's a whole bunch of issues with public funding. I feel pretty good actually with the way government has framed how funding will stack on top of SFI. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, SFI will hopefully be a part of what we do. Obviously, we're delivering on net zero. There's all the things you can do around biodiversity net gain, and all of these things come together to create what is a transformative thing for a farm business. And it's interesting going through it with all the farming community where folk are committed to doing the nitrates, the thing, but see where you can move to. This is just a little bit of analysis we did in terms of what the benefits are, what we'll do for each thing. We have a revenue model. So our key market, certainly in the early years, is with Wessex Water. So they have a requirement through their legal stuff to reduce their nitrates, and we will be because of the way the regulations and laws are framed, we're pretty much the one stop that they need in order to deliver all of this. So there's a massive link with us with the water company. There's potential link with developers as well. We've obviously got farmer to farmer trading as we develop confidence, and then also into other markets for natural capital. For us as well, we've looked at all of this, and we've got Troidos Bank who are helping us with our business modelling. And we know that as things, as you get economies of scale, it becomes more viable. So in our years, it's going to be difficult and expensive to manage, and the commercial viability happens at there's a particular sweet spot where we've got enough farmers in there, we've got enough trading going on with the water company, develop other natural capital, and we have something that is commercially viable. And that's where we're moving into the pilot phase now. What we use the NEIRF for, a whole bunch of stuff which I can chat through, and I'll tell you what, there's an awful lot of work you need to do to get ready for all of this. It's, you know, primarily for me, this is all about relationships. Yeah, you need to work relationships, and some of those require they require memorandums, and they require contracts and everything else to work on those. Benefits for us, and this is my last slide, is for a farmer-led approach, I just think it's critical. I mean, obviously I work for the NFU. I think we do a great job for helping farmers, but at the end of the day, having farmers speaking to government and to the developers of all of these things as to how things need to be is utterly critical. So there's tools around for helping on this stuff. You know, one of the ones that we're using is being developed by the regulator. It's good. Just so happens it works really well for a regulator, not for a farmer. So the fact that farmers have helped with it is just immensely valuable to everybody. So you get the tools that you need, you develop the systems that you need. We're looking to be voluntary rather than regulatory, you know, so there's a fine balance between it all. We know it's all about viability and income, so we have these red lines in there, and there's no better people for negotiating than people who actually run businesses and it matters to them. And I suppose for us, it's about enabling existing farm enterprises to continue. There's a lot of great ones, and those who want to transition, they could and should. That's me.
Thank you, Paul. That was really great. Such an inspiring, ambitious project, but and so many learnings are already coming out. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd like to invite everyone back for a Q&A. So Glenn and also Alison Baker from the EA, who oversees the community of practice, among many other things, and to be able to answer some questions. There's 6 here. We've got 7 minutes, so it's going to be a bit of a quick fire round, and we might not get to them all. There's a question from Ellie Hook that I'll start with. The Wendling Beck is inspiring, and I recognise the need for other landowners to be involved. Andy, this sounds like it might be one for you. Are you looking for new innovative ideas, or could a landowner apply to do something similar but on different land with different ecosystem services?
What I'll try and do here is I'll try and answer Ellie's question there, but also at the same time, Michael's around targets and Matt's around the types of successful projects. I think, broadly speaking, I think we need to recognise this is really early stages in what is quite going to be quite a complex journey. DEFRA and the government have set broad targets about what they want to see, but they do not translate down to this fund. We don't have targets about what we're looking for individual projects. What we do have is we want projects to succeed. So projects such as the Wendling Beck, I think is an excellent example, but every project is going to be different. We cannot have one Wendling Beck project and say problem solved. You know, we need examples that are all examples will have different things to address. Different farmers will have different environments, etc., etc. So there's a wide spectrum there. So similar or different ecosystem services, I think, will be addressed in different ways. Yeah, I think hopefully we don't have individual targets on these projects. We're not looking for loads of projects along the same lines that we've done already, or loads of different ones. One of the primary reasons we're holding this seminar today is because we haven't got a large number of farmers involved in these projects. We don't have a large number of estates or landowners. So we're reaching out, if you want to use those words, to you today, because we want you involved in these schemes. The projects that work for you, I hope, will be the ones that we can fund in the next round.
Brilliant.
Shut up.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks, Andy. There's a question here about sort of insights coming from the current NEIRF. Alison, I wonder if it gives you an opportunity just to remind people how they can access the SharePoint, so that are the current cohort of NEIRF projects delivering insights into the disconnect between on-farm requirement to diversify within the investment community's focus on simplification and replication. Strikes me as maybe it's a bit early for those insights to be coming out, but maybe we can point people to where they might be able to see those insights as they do emerge. Or maybe I'm wrong, Alice, did you tell me?
No, thanks, Helen. I think you're right. That isn't a question that's come up between the cohort yet, but as Andy said in his presentation, it's early days with the projects in terms of how far they've got with their delivery, and we are hosting a sort of number of sessions with them and exploring different aspects. And in January, February, we're starting to look at more of the farming related issues. And I think perhaps we can put that as a question to the group. So as well as them posing questions to us and to DEFRA, we are kind of asking the projects what challenges they're coming up with and using those forums as a discussion opportunity as well. So yeah, I will take that question and we can look at discussing that with the projects in the future. And just a plug really, all the information and the webinars that we're doing are on our SharePoint site, the NEIRF SharePoint site. And perhaps Andy, we can put a link to those in the chat so that people who haven't registered on SharePoint yet are able to do that. Thanks, Helen.
Brilliant. There's one here about whether, how difficult it might be for small land-based businesses. So it says, in terms of NEIRF monitoring and evaluation requirements, are these realistically deliverable by small land-based businesses? Glenn, I see your hand is up actually anyway, but I wondered if this is something that you could be able to chime in on.
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice would be to just go out there and talk to your local sort of environmental NGOs as a starting point. There's various organisations around that will help you either put the bid together or help you start to pull the project together. So it might be worth a conversation with GFI or Finance Earth, and there's various other ones around, even institutions like the RSPB and some of those environmental charities. If you've got a solid project, then just get out there and talk to as many people as possible, and you might be surprised how much help you get along the way.
Thanks, Glenn. I think we're going to make this the last one, and then I've taken your questions. As I say, we'll go away and look at an FAQ. It's Ed Green. Can I, as an individual farmer, apply for NEIRF with a view to getting other farmers and farmer groups, such as my local facilitation fund group, to use the project once funded? Due to the February deadline, it will be quicker to get an application together as an individual as opposed to getting a farming group to get organised and apply by Feb. It's a fair point from Ed. Andy, is that something you might be able to answer?
Yeah, sure. And also just highlight, I've put the link to the SharePoint site in the chat. I think you could put an application as an individual farmer. It would be stronger if it is, it depends on the size of your farm, obviously, and the land area and the catchment you're looking at addressing. There's no reason why you can't apply as an individual farmer. However, it would be strengthen your application if you can indicate the level of support you have from neighbouring farmers or some consortium like that. But it very much does depend, I think, on the level of support you can provide at the time of the application. We recognise that time is tight. This is an application process that everyone has a similar sort of time frame for. So other people will obviously be in a similar position. But I don't know if Glenn has any tips on getting your neighbours to support you, but I would just say to try and get some support, even if it's not firm commitments. Letters of intent would be helpful.
Yeah, talk to the neighbours. Lots of letters of support and letters of intent is good. And two of the landowners, myself and Rosie, one of my co-landowners, are actually part of a wider farm cluster as well. So it doesn't have to be the whole cluster. It can just be a few individual farms out of that to start with, and then you can bring other people on the journey further down the line.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Glenn. So we're going to have to call it a day here. We are going to take the questions away. I see a great question from Jessica, and maybe that's something to take away for the community of practice about what unsuccessful projects might be able to do going forward. Say the link is now in the chat, so you can apply to join there. Thank you for our panel today. Thank you to Paul and Glenn for sharing your time and your projects with everyone and sharing your learnings. It's so helpful to bring it to life. Just to close, to say we're looking forward to seeing your applications and talking to you more about nature-based finance. There are going to be 2 Q&A sessions happening in Jan, as you can see here. So they will be posted soon on the NEIRF SharePoint, our site on GFI Hive and Ecosystems Knowledge Network website, probably in the next couple of days. So do sign up for those. Until then, hope it's been useful, hope you're inspired or encouraged and not deterred. And look forward to speaking to you again, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.